Okay, I have no idea what I did, but we'll just go with it. All right, so we're going to look at our unit skills and understandings. Then we're going to talk about the prompt analysis and the writing plan. And we're going to kind of look at a little introduction, but we're not going to spend a lot of time on that because in the FRQ stream on the rhetorical analysis, you're actually going to look at that in detail. And our primary focus for today is going to be on those body paragraphs because that's where the evidence and commentary goes. But the first step is finding it, right? Of course it is. So our learning intention for today is I'm learning how to use argumentative structures to build high quality body paragraphs. Your success criteria is I can explain how to use the general outline of argumentation to create a writing plan with a clear line of reasoning. Now, line of reasoning is important because remember, that's what's going to get you on the jump from the 2 to the 3. And since that commentary is worth 4 points, you really want to get as many as you can. Our goal to do that is to use Toolman argumentation to write those body paragraphs that address the concrete and the abstract tasks that are hidden within the prompt. So it sounds like a lot, but I have absolute faith that you can do this. Just to kind of give you an idea of what those specific unit skills and understandings are, we're looking at the ability to convey your position through one or more claims that require defense and evidence and reasoning that builds those pieces together. So your evidence might include facts or anecdotes, analogies, statistics, examples, details, illustrations, expert opinions, personal observations, personal experience, testimonies, or even experiments. We have a little a mnemonic device that we'll use for that called ReHugo, but I wanted to make sure that you saw exactly what College Board expects because it's really easy to meet the expectation when you know exactly what it is. So, big ideas here are that if you look on this, claims, effective claims, provoke interest and require a defense rather than simply stating the obvious, known facts that require no defense and no justification. And writers relate the source material to their own argument by syntactically embedding the quoted, paraphrased, or summarized information from one or more sources into their own ideas. Now, for the rhetorical analysis, your source is going to be the text that they've given you. But the question that you guys keep asking is, how do I know what evidence is good evidence? And how do I build that commentary in a sophisticated way? So, in the chat, really quickly, what do you remember from the stream? What do you remember? How do you read with an analytical mind? How do you annotate a rhetorical analysis prompt and save time? And what did you learn about reading and annotating? Tell me in the chat. Start with verbs when annotating. That's a really good strategy. And we're actually going to talk about that today because your verbs become your strategies. Good deal. Other thoughts? Okay. So quick question for you then, how do you approach the rhetorical analysis? What do you typically do? Like, do you spend more time planning or more time writing? In the chat, just kind of let me know. Let's see, where are you spending the bulk of your time? More time writing. And that is really, really common. Now, I love what you put there, writing, but I underline important phrases beforehand. So one of the things that we have really found, Kevin and I, with our students, is that if we look at kind of a timeline and look at how can we put these pieces together and help our students to be more prepared. Because I don't know about you, but have you ever had a moment where like you just forgot what you were doing? Okay, so your writing plan kind of helps you with that. And here's just a general outline. Now, of course, this is just a general outline. If you have something that you feel works for you, you can completely disregard our kind of loose-ish minute guidelines on the sides. But this is where we start with our students kind of together. So we look at analyzing the prompt, just at what's in the prompt itself. You got about 3 minutes doing that. It's going to give you aspects that you can talk about later along the way, and it's going to let you know what is your abstract and concrete task. Then you want to spend about 8 minutes going by and reading and annotating the text. Okay, now you might need more depending on how comfortable you are or aren't with annotating and doing rhetorical analysis as you go. But that might also change, like if you get a more recent text versus if you get an older text. So you really got to know yourself and your reading ability and your academic stamina in order to identify your timeline. And then you want to spend about 3 minutes with a quick outline. Now, we're going to look at these pieces together as we put them together because when you spend more time on your writing plan, what you'll find is the writing itself actually comes easier. So how can we create a writing plan in a really fast way that helps us to build those paragraphs in our brain so that when we're writing, even if we forget it, we've got a cute little thing on our piece of paper to help us remember it, right? So this is just kind of your outline. And here's an example of analyzing the prompt. So remember, you take about 3 minutes. Now on the actual AP exam, you're going to be allowed to have a blue pen, a black pen, and a pencil. Now, some students, they've trained themselves to use highlighters all year long, and this is actually to kind of show you the rhetorical aspects in it so that you can see the pieces that they give you in the prompt that you can bring into your evidence and commentary. But you can actually kind of, if you need to use those highlighters and those tools, now would be a good time to start looking at a thick blue ink versus a thin blue ink, or a thick black ink versus a thin blue ink. Maybe one of those Bic pens versus a Pilot gel pen. So you can see the difference when you're annotating it. So that's just a tiny little testing tidbit that might help you out if you're using the pen and paper test. So one thing I want to highlight here is up on the left-hand side, you see the concrete task. It's the task in the prompt that it tells you specifically do this. And it's almost always going to be something about the rhetorical choices. You'll have to figure them out, you'll have to evaluate them, one of those ideas. And then of course the abstract is, what is his case? So he says, you know what, fix it or we're going to march. Oh, by the way, not a threat here. So when we look at it, you want to try to figure out how can you bring the rhetorical aspects into your writing. So quick question I have for you then, how do you do that? How do you take the information in the prompt and put it into your paragraphs? So one thing that you can definitely do is use that to help you with grouping your examples, 100%. You can use it in that commentary piece to show that you understand the complexities and the tensions of it. You can actually bring in, for example, where it specifies, I'll pull my paper copy out here. So I have a copy here, and you guys will have a copy as well. But if I look at it, and it talks about who the letter is written to, somewhere in my commentary I might say, because this is a letter, Gandhi does this, in the hopes that Viceroy Lord Irwin will do this. Now, I might actually be able, later in the passage, it talks about how he will refrain from putting this out there, publication of this letter. So you can actually say, although it is a letter directly written to Lord Irwin, Gandhi makes it clear that he intends to publish it. So you can use little pieces from the prompt to help you in your commentary and analysis to show that you understand it. That's why it's a really good idea to analyze those aspects as you bring it in from the get-go. Okay, so here is a copy of the annotated text. Now, if you need a copy, you can scan the little QR code and it'll get there for you. And this is just a sample of an annotated copy that we've used because it has so many pieces on there. Now, when you look at it, you're probably thinking, no way this is an 8-minute read through. But remember, you got 3 minutes in annotating, you got your 8 minutes or 3 minutes in your prompt, you got 8 minutes in the text, and then you got another 3 minutes to go back and plan your outline. And so what you can kind of see with the colors here is the going through in that first read is going to be basically the underlines and the circles and things like that. Going back and looking at creating the outline is where you have the black in there, the paragraph 1, the 1A, the 1B, the paragraph 2, that's that last 3 minutes in the frame. So you can kind of see you've got all of these pieces and that time is built in together. So what would be the benefit of annotating it and creating your outline just like this, just by putting your paragraph 1, your 1A, your 1B? What's the benefit of putting it all on that same page before you even start writing? So once you forget, you have this on your page and you can easily go right back to it. And if you feel like you haven't written enough because you're trying to make sure that you're being consistent and thorough in your evidence and commentary for your body paragraphs, you'll be able to go back into the section that you marked and find another piece of evidence that'll fit in that section and that will serve that specific purpose. Okay, I do have a question for you here. Sometimes when we show examples of annotations, some of our students have they feel some kind of way. So I'm curious here, how do your annotations compare to the model annotations? Are they about the same? Do you feel like yours are strong, but they're not as much as what's on the model? Do you feel like they're there and you can do it? And even though like you've got symbols and stuff like that, but you're good? Or do you feel like you look at yours and it doesn't really prove that you read and analyzed what you were reading when you were annotating? So how do you feel about your annotations compared to the ones in the model? Okay, I'm going to leave that poll there for just a second while we look at the next step. Now, this is actually a strategy that I learned from one of my students here at Fiveable, I guess about 2 years ago. And I think it was Catherine that this came from. Brandon, correct me if I'm wrong. So this concept was identify, decide, and analyze, IDA. And the idea is that when you go over your annotations, you're looking at what strategies are there. You're just going to identify what is happening in this passage. And then you've got to decide, why is this happening in this passage? And if you're looking at it and it doesn't seem like it has a big effect, you're probably going to decide not to use that one. But once you look at it and you decide which ones have a greater impact on the reader, then you want to go through and analyze, how does that specific device analyze the impact? So the IDA strategy can really help you as you're planning it out. And you probably saw that IDA strategy was evident when you were looking at the model. So over here, it looks like we're doing pretty good. That you feel like you've got your annotations there, but they're just a few symbols, and that's totally okay. So I love that we all feel like ours prove that we read and analyzed, because that's tremendously important. One thing that drives me crazy is when I'm checking annotations and it's just underlines in a couple of places, because that doesn't really show that interaction and that analysis. So great jobs, friends. Super exciting. Now, I have a couple of questions here just to kind of help you think about how do you identify and select evidence? Because this is a very common question that I get sent to me that I've seen in the Discord. I've seen you guys talk about that regularly. How do I find evidence, and how do I know that it's really strong evidence for me to use? And so here are just a few guiding questions that we've thought of. First of all, are you trying to give some examples? And if you're trying to give examples, why? What do you hope to achieve by giving examples of this thing? Or are you hoping to clarify something? If you are seeking to clarify, why do you need to clarify it in that way? Are you emphasizing something? Why do you need to emphasize this particular element? And then how are you seeking to draw a relationship? Thinking about sort of that classification mode of discourse that we have. What is the point of it? Are you wanting to draw a relationship with or to something, in comparison to something, or are you trying to show that they're kind of separate and different? And why? And then are you hoping to build an emotional effect? And if so, why are you hoping to do that? Which emotion is it, and why is that the emotion that you're trying to use here? Now, the brilliant thing about identifying evidence and selecting evidence is that these exact same questions work for you to be able to identify what you're going to write about, and then to help you build your paper as well. So hopefully you guys will find these questions really helpful to you, not only in terms of how do you find the evidence to write about, but how do you build your own response, okay? What is your goal, and how can you best achieve your goal? And in the rhetorical analysis, what is Gandhi's goal, and how does Gandhi best reach that as well? So, zooming in a little bit closer, it lets you see exactly what's going to be written about here. You can see the chunk that has been created. You can recognize the focus on I, that there is personal experience, that he's acknowledging risks. You can see things like mad risk, gravest character, conversion, no less than. That looks like it's going to be 1A. Moving on down, you can see that it's got the 1B down there near, if the people will join me, the suffering they will undergo will be enough to melt the stoniest of hearts. Whew. Okay. So you can kind of see what he's doing, but then he also goes in and he tells you the plan will be to combat the evils that I have sampled out here. Okay. So that lets you kind of look at what's happening. Now, when you do that, you create the outline super quick, but just kind of wanted to give you a reminder about that structure. So you want to have that introduction, that's going to have your thesis statement, and then you want to move into the proposition and proof part. Now, someone last week asked about the 6-part oration. You can absolutely apply that here if that's what your teacher wants you to do. And so you would be moving into that narratio part of that oration guide. You're looking at a topic sentence with your claim about Gandhi's claim, or in the rhetorical analysis, your claim about whatever that writer's claim is. And then you're going to have a general outline to follow. A concrete detail, some kind of evidence, and then commentary and analysis, and then concrete detail, and then commentary and analysis. The end of that paragraph should link back to the abstract. Notice the way that the details and the commentary come together, right? It's not all a bunch of evidence at the top and then the commentary down at the bottom. So you're able to see what those separate pieces are, okay? So with the questions, then what you're looking at is how can those questions help you figure out what is happening here in this passage? How can these questions help me to identify what I'm going to put in body paragraph 1? Okay, so you want to look at it and think, okay, what is going to be my topic sentence? And then based on my topic sentence, what is Gandhi doing here? Now, in this case, he actually tells you that he is combating such evils as I've sampled out here. So he tells you that he's trying to give you the example. You might justify it. You might say he is trying to clarify what is meant by evils in society. And then the next step would be, well, why is he doing that? Well, he's trying to convince Lord Irwin that what they're doing is evil, what they're doing is wrong. Okay, So we're going to look at those questions again kind of as we move forward, and definitely look at the one that matches your immediate purpose. Okay, so for example, on this one, you can see in this one in the blue it says that he is acknowledging the risk in that first chunk, and then it says he's giving personal experience. So think about what your purpose is. What are you hoping to do, and then what will help you to do that? Okay. All right. Hope that answers that question. Okay. Now, the next device that we kind of use here is called Toby, and Toby is thesis, outline, big idea. And the point of this type of writing plan is that it clarifies what your thesis statement's going to be. You have a quick idea of what you're going to write about, and then you have a big idea so you can link this particular thing to kind of the bigger picture. Why does this matter? What is the complexity and the tension that is focused on in this issue? And how is this letter, in this case, how is this letter going to help them to kind of move forward with it? So you got to look at what goes in that outline. So in general, your outline needs to have that defensible thesis that answers the prompt. I've seen a couple of times that you guys will say things like AP equals answer the prompt. So you can definitely think of it that way. When you're doing that, make sure that you're including the context and the significance, some level of relevance there, like why does it matter? When you're moving into evidence, I want you to think in terms of strategies. These are the rhetorical elements that are linked by their placement in the passage or by their purpose in the passage. Now, I want to really kind of highlight that because someone mentioned a moment ago that you can look at the evidence that's being used in terms of the importance and the purpose that's there. And this is exactly what you're looking at. If you want to look at it, are you going to talk about it chronologically through the way that the letter is structured, or are you going to talk about it based on the purpose that section is looking to discuss? Okay? So then you want to think, why in the world did the author do this? Why does Gandhi think that he needs to acknowledge the risks? Why does he use the phrase mad risk and gravest character and conversion of a nation? Why are those the words that he chooses to build into this when he's saying, hey, I understand there is some serious risk here? Okay. All right. The next thing would be, how does it contribute to the message and the purpose? Okay. And then can you tie that back to the significance and the relevance? Can you link it back to why does it matter that Gandhi has said that this is mad risk and that it is the gravest of characters? Why has he gone through the effort to combat such evils as he has sampled out? Well, you could easily say he probably has a little bit more experience and background with Lord Irwin. And so Gandhi is making an appeal to Lord Irwin's humanity, just to the fact that he values basic human life and he understands morally what is good and morally what is evil. And so you can bring in those pieces to connect it. So look for complexities and tensions that are going to link the purpose to the paragraph. If Gandhi is in fact trying to say, hey, Lord Irwin, I know that you understand the value of a human life, it makes perfect sense that he would say, hey, here's why it's a risk, but it's a risk we got to take. Okay? So your conclusion would then link back to your thesis, giving a little bit about that context. And then, of course, that outline, it can be jotted down notes, it can be bullets, it can be whatever you need it to be, as long as you have one. Because when you have a moment where you forget where you're going or you've forgotten where you went, you'll have that outline to help you out to figure out those pieces along the way. Okay, so what did she say the parts of a strategy are connected by again? Okay, so it might be that you're going to talk about it based on the location in the text. So think about it like chronological order in the whatever you've been given. In this case, it's the letter. Or you might do it by purpose. Now, some students actually will do it by device, and that's completely and totally okay if you choose to do it by device. But I do have a question here for you, because I'm curious. what do you typically write? Do you typically write a strategy-driven analysis or a device-driven analysis? There is no wrong answer here. I'm just curious of it. A strategy-driven device would be looking for verbs, like someone said earlier. And then a device-driven would be, like you talked about how he used metaphor, and you talked about how he used specific imagery, things like that. What do you typically write? Okay. Once again, there is no right or wrong answer here. When you look at what we're seeing, what we want to see is that you are able to say, hey, what is Gandhi doing and how does it work? Like, how does it help him to achieve his purpose? We're going to look at the concepts of a strategy-driven outline because that shows that you can take those little pieces and put it together, right? Sometimes with a text, you get, and this happens even to me, you get a text and there's like a paragraph and you're like, I just can't focus right now. I have no idea what this is saying right here. I got nothing. And that's okay, because when you're using a chunk of the text, you can focus on the chunk overall and just ignore that little piece that you didn't quite get, okay? And with devices, you can do the same thing. So strategy-driven outlines are when you take the chunks and you say, okay, in this chunk, what is he doing? And that's going to focus on the verb. So in this first chunk, he is acknowledging the risks of nonviolence against the British. And then you can see in the second chunk, he is giving his personal experience. Now, in going back in those 3 minutes to create the writing plan, you'll note that chunk 1 didn't have enough pieces in there to be able to write a body paragraph. So chunk 1 and chunk 2 then were lumped together. Do you see that? And that gave them enough evidence to write that paragraph. So what is he doing? He's acknowledging the risks of nonviolence against the British. He says, you know what? We're coming in. We're going to be nonviolent. This is something that we need to do. And I understand that that might go poorly for us. So the question is, why does he do that? Well, he's doing it because he recognizes that Lord Irwin values human rights, and he hopes to convince him that the suffering of India is not morally or ethically acceptable. And that kind of sets up where he's going to go, because at the end, you'll notice that Gandhi pulls that piece back in when he brings in kind of where we're going with this. He reiterates what the plan is and says that this isn't a threat. So the piece that is missing here is how. How does it work? How does it go for him? So how does he do this? And when we look at it, we want to break it down just a little bit further. So you've got the concept of he uses the diction that you see there, and then bringing it down into other pieces, you would see other sections of ideas that he's done. So what does this look like? Well, we have the aspects guide sheet for you. If you are interested in that, that was actually on your resources so that you can have that. This is something we shared earlier in the CRAM sessions as well, just as a blank guide there for you. But here's kind of what you would visualize in that argument being created, okay? So you have this thesis or your primary claim. By acknowledging the risks of nonviolence, explaining the need for civil disobedience, and reiterating the motivation behind the Salt March, Gandhi hopes to convince Lord Irwin to advocate for the end of British exploitation of India. So when you're building it, you've got to identify your secondary claims. So first of all, the first thing that was there is acknowledging the risk of nonviolence. So how does he acknowledge the risk of nonviolence? I've got to find the evidence in the text that proves that he has actually acknowledged the risk. And then my commentary and analysis, I need to look at why did he do that? How did it work on Lord Irwin? How is Lord Irwin supposed to respond as a result of what was there? In looking at it, the next part it says explaining the need for civil disobedience. So then my next secondary claim is, how does he explain the need for civil disobedience? What is the reason on that? And then the third one would be reiterating the motivation. And so you would look at why is that being done there as well. So you can take that thesis statement, you can pull it apart and kind of move into building the writing from where it's at, okay? All right, so Here's a quick example of an introduction. Again, you guys will talk about the introduction paragraph when we do the FRQ, Rhetorical Analysis Review, in a couple of weeks. But this is just to kind of give you that outline there. So you're looking at nonviolence has often been a technique used by social and political figures to peacefully display opposition to a certain law of practice. In the book on civil disobedience by Henry David Thoreau, Thoreau argued that citizens must exercise their responsibility to refuse to adhere to unjust laws. Later, civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. would take a similar approach by organizing peaceful protests to further the rights of African Americans. Now, that might seem a little bit off task, but notice the way it's kind of funneling it in. It's bringing in and showing us why it matters at this point in time. A little bit of information here from the prompt directly. In 1930, I have to sneeze, hold on. In 1930, Gandhi used the principles of civil disobedience and nonviolence to protest the unjust control of India by Britain by arranging a salt march to display the unfair British monopoly on salt. By describing the British control of Indian commerce as greedy and misguided, clearly asserting the peaceful nature of the protest, and offering to negotiate with Lord Viceroy Irwin, Gandhi makes the case that his nonviolent protests stand up for the good of mankind against the tyranny of British. So notice that this pulls in all of these pieces. It connects back clearly to the prompt, so that rhetorical analysis that you did when you broke down the aspects of the prompt alone before you even got into the text, it's clearly connected to the introduction paragraph. So we then want to look at how do we build this body paragraph? How do we use that Tolman model in the rhetorical analysis to focus on evidence and commentary? So here's a sample paragraph for you here. This way you can kind of look at it, okay? So we have the claim. After establishing his theme of standing up to tyranny, Gandhi shifts to emphasizing the benefits that a change in British policy could bring to relations with India. Gandhi frames British control of commerce as wrong by saying that his goal is to combat such evils as the British government has enacted on India. Gandhi says that British commerce must be purified of greed and states that after they can do so, they will clearly see their own wrongdoing. This once again builds upon the foundation of the noble goal that Gandhi built in the earlier segment, because it portrays Gandhi as standing up for the rights of mankind. Although Gandhi encourages the British to deal with these evils and change their ways, he also gives them an ultimatum by saying if they do not change, he will lead a nonviolent protest to disregard the provisions of the salt laws. Here, Gandhi ties back his discussion to the British monopoly on salt, while also asserting that he will take peaceful action to disobey the laws that he deems unjust. Now, I want you to see that that outline we started with comes clearly through the sample paragraph. You have your subclaim, you have the evidence. Notice that it's not a whole big chunk. It's just little phrases kind of brought in, and it's mixed in with this student's writing as well. The commentary and analysis clearly explains how the evidence proves this need to change policy and bringing positive relationships with India. And you can see that it layers in another level of evidence and then brings back that commentary and analysis as well. It clearly links back to kind of that overall purpose of the original thesis statement. Now, I also want to highlight here, notice the way that this paragraph is very clearly not the first body paragraph, right? So I wanted to just kind of highlight that use of the line of reasoning, because what we say here is we've got all of those underlined parts and they are a part of that logical processing. So that logical thought process from one step to the next. After doing this, Gandhi frames it this way. He says this. This again builds on the foundation. So you're able to see those pieces that help to increase the line of reasoning and as well as the sophistication. It even brings in this although Gandhi. So you're able to see that there's a little bit of kind of a concession that's happening in this particular part. Now, this is a strong example of a body paragraph. What do you guys think about it? Did you have any kind of thoughts or questions or concerns about this strong level body paragraph? Any observations about it? Okay. As you guys have questions, please feel free to continue typing them in, and we'll keep looking at them as we move forward. Okay. So what in the world is the body paragraph setup? What does it need to be? Like, you get it. You've got to have a claim. You need your evidence. You need your commentary analysis, evidence, commentary analysis, and a link. You got that. So how do we build that? I'll pause for you to take a screenshot. Okay, so what you have here is your topic sentence and your transition, and we've got a little frame here for you. You might say Gandhi begins with or begins by, and then tell us what's happening, okay? And then give some explicit textual support. Pull one or two words, maybe a smaller section of a sentence, probably not a whole sentence, definitely not more than one sentence together. If you're pulling ideas from consecutive sentences, you can use the ellipses in there. And then you just want to discuss how do those examples support the idea that you're trying to prove. So connect that strategy back to what you're as the other way. It's a mirror image, I'm sorry. All right. So then you want to come back to those questions. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to give examples? Why is that what you need to do here? Okay, well, in that first example, I was trying to, or the student was trying to give examples of the ways in which Gandhi is acknowledging the risks. He is saying it's a mad risk. He is saying it's the gravest of character. And then the question becomes why? Well, why is he doing that? Well, he's trying to say, you know what, we understand that this is a big risk, but we need you to understand that this risk is worth taking, okay? So you can kind of see that. As it moves into the next section of the text, well, you might say, what is he doing? He's hoping to clarify. He's clarifying for us, why is this such a problem? He says, well, you know what? I served them blindly, but my eyes were kind of open to this situation. And so he's clarifying his personal experience and the way in which Gandhi has realized, hey, this is wrong. This is morally and ethically inappropriate and unacceptable. So you can kind of see those pieces pulled together there as well. Okay, so how do we build the body paragraph? So I thought that we could kind of look at it together with that original thesis statement that we talked about, okay? So by acknowledging the risks of nonviolence, explaining the need for civil disobedience, and reiterating the motivation behind the Salt March, Gandhi hopes to convince Lord Irwin to advocate for the end of British exploitation in India. Now, you can stop there if you want to, but maybe you know a little bit about it and you know that this was just right before, like they actually won it, because maybe you remember seeing that in the prompt. You can say something that leads to that idea, that which ultimately happened in 1947, or which was one step on the path to the freedom. Okay, so you can bring that in. So if this is our thesis statement, then what we've got to do is we've got to figure out how do we build these other pieces in. And we've done a couple of different things here today, and I want us to be able to really see how we put these things together. So the first thing that we looked at was your strategy-driven outline. Because we have that outline, we're better prepared to build this body paragraph right now. Okay. We've also talked about visualizing your argument. So when you visualize it, you're able to see the way that the first paragraph clearly links to the second paragraph, and the way that both of those paragraphs connect to the third paragraph, and the way that however many body paragraphs you end up with clearly support that primary claim, that thesis statement on the top. We also gave you a body paragraph setup and a few little like sentence frames and sentence starters that you can use as well. So you've got a lot of resources to help you out as you work on building these essays and these paragraphs in your classes at school and that sort of thing. So when we're looking at it, what we can see is how to put these pieces together. So the topic sentence here is going to be the first thing in the thesis statement, okay? So Gandhi recognizes that Lord Irwin values human rights and, hoping to convince him that the suffering of India is not morally or ethically acceptable, he begins with acknowledging the risks of nonviolence against the British. So that takes care of the first question. What is he doing? Now we've got to look at why. Well, why is also included here. So we have a very strong sentence. So now we need to look at what are the specific things that are done in order to do that. Notice that the evidence would be that it is a mad risk, that it is the gravest character, that it's worth any amount of risk because of how they have been preyed upon. Did you catch that phrase in there? preyed upon. Absolutely. So we can put each of those little phrases together and talk about why he is acknowledging that risk and how is that going to function to prove that the way that they're suffering is not morally and ethically acceptable. So we might have something like intentionally diplomatic diction to build an admonishing tone and communicate the severity of the conditions caused by British rule of India. And that would be what we use to explain that evidence in there. Next piece of evidence, he moves to talking about his personal experience with a focus on equal love for your people with mine. And he basically is saying, hey, I love your people just like I love my people. Why don't you love my people the way you love your people? So then he says he's doing that to expose the sufferings. Now, this is an example of what I mentioned in the beginning. When you're talking about it and you want to pull ideas from multiple longer sentences, the ellipses that are in here really kind of help to nail that into place. So what is it doing? It's exposing the sufferings. Why? Because they will be enough to melt the stoniest of hearts. Oof, right? Yeah, you felt that one. So then we bring in our commentary and analysis. We're going to explain, okay, so if that's what he's doing, why is he doing it? And how does it impact Lord Irwin, since that's who it's supposed to go to? Well, it says that he highlights the wrongdoing of the British Empire by juxtaposing it with his own weapon of love. How about that vocabulary there, right? And peace to evoke sympathy for the Indian people. So you're really able to put together all of these little pieces and see a complex body paragraph coming together based on what was originally just kind of jotted down on a piece of paper. Once you are writing your essay, you can easily build all this together. So, what do you think? Is this something that is completely and totally approachable? Do you feel like you can actually focus on the chats and on the evidence and bringing in those pieces together, kind of like what we did today? What do you think? Do you feel a little bit better about it? Show. Sorry, I forgot to hit show. Super fast. I love that. Good deal. Okay, so when we're looking at this, I know that this is a really complex skill to kind of think about and put all of these pieces together. And one thing that we do here at Fiveable is we give tons of resources. And the goal is not for you to use every single tool that we've given you, but the goal is for you to look at the tools that we've provided you with and figure out what works for you and what's going to help you be successful. Okay, so it looks like the majority of us feel much better about our ability to do this kind of as you go through it. But I thought maybe just in case, if you kind of stick with me, we might look at one more body paragraph. Now, if you are looking at the slides on that first page, in the notes at the bottom, I've actually given you an activity that I've done in my class before with a student sample, and you can go through and break it down and really look at why is this the way that it is in terms of scoring in each level of the rubric. But that's just there for you as an option if you want to. I did include an answer key so that you could see what that looks like with those resources too. So here's another example, though I did want to just kind of let you guys see. Throughout his letter, Gandhi is conciliatory and respectful. He writes to the British with the intent of asking for the reversal of a law, so he knows that he must be polite and courteous. His demeanor conveys to the British his sense of servitude to the British in lines 16 through 20. However, he is not stepping down, but rather standing up to the British respectfully. He states that he does not seek to harm your people, which simultaneously reassures the British of nonviolence, but also conveys Gandhi's sense of urgency. He is going to act. He is going to do something, and he is informing the British of it. Gandhi is not submitting. He is asserting himself, but with respect. Throughout his letter, he uses imperative verbs, but states them politely, so to not convey a violent tone. He says, I invite you, which sounds polite, but indirectly is an order to the British to reverse their ways. He finishes his letter by reminding the British that he is not threatening them, but merely reminding them that he will act if they do not. Through the letter, his tone is both respectful to the British, but is also clear and forceful in its message. Notice the way that this pulls in evidence just like the previous examples. Small chunks of the text are pulled in and mixed together with the student's writing so that you can see kind of that sophistication of thought. You understand what is Gandhi doing, why is Gandhi doing it, and how does it work. Now, in this particular case, you can kind of see that it pulls in evidence from different places. I think this paragraph looks at his tone in general. So this is, some of you guys were asking about, are you doing it by location? Or are you doing it kind of by device? This would be an example of a paragraph that's written about that device, that tone specifically. And so that's why you see it pulled from all over the place. Notice where it does say the lines 16 through 20. You don't actually have to cite the lines in your rhetorical analysis unless you really want to, okay? Now, keep in mind, when you're building kind of that outline on your exam, you're looking at 3 minutes. So if you're taking the time to go through and handwrite these sentences, it's not going to work for you. But if you're building it into your outlining, you're building it into the annotation of the text, it's going to be right there for you the whole time. So how in the world does evidence and commentary connect back to the rubric? Well, I wanted to just kind of walk away with you guys looking at the bigger picture and why we like to focus so much on commentary and analysis. If we look at the rubric for this particular evidence and commentary area, what we see is that the evidence needs to be specific to support all claims in the line of reasoning. That's going to be that 3 that you see. You're looking at the difference between a 3 and a 4 is some of that evidence is supported and thoroughly explained versus in the 4, it's consistent, okay? Consistent doesn't mean that your first body paragraph is this long with 5 pieces of evidence and really nailing the aspects, and then the next paragraph has 1 piece of evidence and you kind of talk about the reason that it worked. It means that it does that same. You are consistent throughout all of your claims that are presented in the text. When we're looking at the rhetorical function, you kind of see this down there as well. For that 2, some of it relates to the student's argument. And the 3, at least one choice is linked to the writer's argument, and then 4 is multiple choices. So you always want to nail that, talking about multiple choices that are there. Make sure you got your line of reasoning. Make sure that you are supporting the evidence in the line of reasoning. And then remember that difference is some or consistently. So hopefully that kind of helps you in terms of figuring out where you are and what you're looking at with writing that. So our goal for today was that you would be able to use the argumentative structure to build high quality rhetorical analysis body paragraphs. We wanted to make sure that you could use the general outline of argumentation to create a writing plan that has a clear line of reasoning. In order to do that, we talked about how to build that Toolman argument with your body paragraphs, addressing the concrete and the abstract task that was hidden there in the prompt for you so that you would kind of know what you were looking at. In doing this, we looked at 3 sample body paragraphs, the strong body paragraph in the very beginning, then we looked at the pieces of framing an individual body paragraph, and then we looked at another example of a strong body paragraph with commentary and analysis there at the end. So we covered so much information today. If you guys have any questions, I want you to go ahead and put those in there. We will actually be able to go over those questions here in just a minute. As you're writing out those questions, I do want to remind you to keep the conversation going in Discord. We got that link there for you, so you are open and able to do that. And then, of course, you've got claims and evidence trivia tomorrow. And then you're going to look at argument structures on the 23rd. And then we got another trivia coming up on the 28th. So lots of super exciting things here for you. I am Stephanie Kirk. I'm going to answer your questions here for just a few minutes. If you have anything at all, you can reach out to me on Twitter. You can reach out to me on Discord, or you can send me an email, stephanie@fiveable.me. Super excited to have been here with you guys tonight. So let's check out your questions here. Let's see, is it okay to say the jump between a 3 to a 4 involves consistency and thoroughness, or is it just all of the points? So I think that's fair to say. When you are looking at it, kind of the biggest thing that I talk about is the jump from 2 to 3 is line of reasoning, okay? So you really want to hit that you've got that line of reasoning. And of course, the evidence that you choose and the commentary and analysis is going to support that as well. But then you can move it. That consistency is going to be the difference between the 3 and the 4. And that's specific to the rubric. On the rubric, it actually specifies, if we look at it, you can see right here, it actually specifies that difference between some versus all. So you've got that very clear differentiation between 3 points and 4 points. What is it? It's that line of reasoning, and that you have some of it is supported versus consistency. So I think I saw another question. Okay, so question was, to be on your way for 4 or 5, what score should we aim for in each essay? You know, I have the same question. This test that you guys are taking, it's the first time this test has been done this way, and it's changed a good bit. So we don't have a specific answer on that at this point. I would love to be able to tell you that I did, but I hate to lie to you. What I can tell you is that we've been told, and if we go back and we look at the rubrics for the 2018 and 2019 student responses, and we look at how those responses scored on those rubrics versus how they scored on the new rubrics, kind of what we can see is it looks like you want to have about a 4 out of 6 on each of the individual essays. Definitely you want to make sure you get that thesis point. You want to aim for a 3 in that commentary and analysis. I would say worry more about being consistent throughout than about sophistication, because one thing that I've noticed is sophistication sort of happens, and it seems like it's really more common to see sophistication when you nail that 4 in evidence and commentary. So the question is, should we stick to roughly 1 to 2 sentences for commentary for each piece of evidence? You know, I hate to say yes, and I hate to say no. I think that you've got to make sure that it fits. Like, whatever you're going to say needs to get exactly what, it needs to serve exactly what you're trying to serve. But you don't want to go into redundant repetition and kind of circular reasoning in that. So I think 1 to 2 sentences is a good guideline, but I definitely would not, like, I wouldn't freak out. Oh my gosh, I don't have, 2 complex sentences here. And I wouldn't be like, uh-oh, I've got 2. I better not write my next idea down. So kind of think about it like that. All right. I think that answers all of our questions. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you guys. I know that Brandon is going to hang out with y'all for a little bit on the Discord. Any big questions, feel free to reach them out, send them to us. We'll talk to them and kind of let you know. Oh, so the slides are linked in Airtable. The slides are linked in Airtable. So we'll have to double check how those come to the student dashboard, but they should be on your dashboard. So we'll double check on that and make sure and get that to you. All right, I hope you guys have a wonderful Saturday. Hang out with Brandon. I'll jump in for the chat just for a few minutes, kind of listen and see if you guys need anything at all. He really is amazing. He's going to answer everything for you. You guys have a great day. I look forward to seeing you soon. Bless you, my child. See ya.